All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good break, had a moment to just get up, stretch, walk around, maybe get some food real quick. Want to welcome Priyanka back. She's going to lead our next panel. It's going to be how cryptocurrencies are evolving the privacy market. Today, decentralized applications are taking the privacy problem with new angles and evolving the market for user data and privacy. The panel is going to be led by Priyanka again, and really excited to hear from both Dr. Waterhouse and Roman Storm. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dustin. And thanks for having me back. It's good to be here. So, hey, everyone. Priyanka again here with Open Law and the Lao. And I just want to welcome you guys, welcome our guests, rather, Stephen Waterhouse of Orchid Labs and Roman Storm of Tornado Cash. Both are well known in the privacy market. I love that their names both have water symbols in them, or water-related symbols. So it's kind of a fun little twist to that. Today, we're also going to just, like as Dustin mentioned, really dive into the cross-section between privacy and blockchains, which is obviously a hotly contested product. Okay, Roman, you're back. I was like, where'd you go? Okay, cool. Okay, awesome. So let's just kick things off. Maybe for those who don't know, maybe if you could introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about Orchid Labs and Tornado Cash. So Stephen, Dr. Waterhouse, if you want to kind of go first and tell everyone a little bit about yourself and Orchid Labs, that'd be great.
Yeah, hey, is my video working right now? I'm just trying to figure out. Maybe I'm in the wrong place. It is? Okay. Okay, that's good. All right, yeah, you guys can hear me okay? Good, okay. Orchid Labs, so yeah, we're a decentralized network with our first applications focused on VPN services. We've developed a really innovative layer 2 scaling technology called nanopayments that allows us to do payments at data networking speeds. It's a probabilistic approach. We launched last year in December. We have clients for iOS, Android, OS X, and partnered with a bunch of existing professional VPN companies who are running the network in a fully decentralized way. We're very focused on aspects of privacy on a consumer and business level, and very interested in all the new innovations in the space, whether it's layer 1 or smart contract innovations or privacy preserving approaches.
Amazing.
Yeah, hi, I'm Roman Storm, co-founder of Tornado Cash. Tornado Cash is a non-custodial privacy solution. It improves transaction privacy by breaking the on-chain link between recipient and destination address. It uses a smart contract that accepts token deposits that can be withdrawn by a different address. So whenever the token is withdrawn by the new address, it's really hard to link the withdrawal to the deposit, ensuring complete privacy.
Sweet. Awesome, thanks for that. So maybe let's dive into some of the meatier topics of privacy. You know, I, for one, and I think many see privacy as a fundamental human right. Financial privacy across multiple jurisdictions is some of the most protected financial data out there. And really with blockchain, every transaction is a financial one. And given the pseudonymous nature of the technology, what implications do you think the privacy preserving technology has to the user? I know it's a really broad ranging question, but maybe like on a holistic high level, you could talk a little bit about that, and also like just on a practical level as well. I'd love to just hear your thoughts philosophically on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So my opinion is that in traditional Web 2.0 world, like we have all of our transactions private by default from the public. So if we make a bet that the future of financial structure should utilize blockchain technology under the hood, we have to make sure that we allow users to transact privately. So, for example, like any business owner who runs who pays the salaries to his or her employees doesn't probably want all of that information to be public, and so that like the competitors know how much exactly you pay to your employees, so they can actually steal your talent. So to solve those issues, I think it's vital that we have to work on a privacy on-chain solutions. And of course, we can't just solve everything by on-chain. We also have to have off-chain solutions like Orchid. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think just on a broader level, I think that there's been a great deal of focus over the years on the privacy challenges of things like ad networks and the things that we've been focusing on, such as ISP data collection and even VPN company data collection and logging. But you know, kind of your financial trail is really one of the most interesting things that tells me not just what you're buying, but also where you are, because I can track the location of the stores that you're purchasing at. And you always see, like in kind of like spy movies, people, you know, they get the credit card information first, and they find out, oh, they're at this gas station. And so I think there's probably been like not enough focus on kind of like a non-blockchain perspective of people's understanding that this financial data is really a very important piece. And I think that the thing that concerns me on a global level right now is how for many years there was a sort of naive perspective is like, oh, blockchains and decentralized everything is just going to fix this problem of privacy. But meanwhile, we now see central banks adopting you know, so-called privacy like or like sort of so-called blockchain solutions in digital currencies. And they're just like rolling in all the tracking data that they can into that information. And they're not going to build, you know, privacy-preserving blockchains that support stable coins or digital currencies. They're going to do the exact opposite in many cases. So I think that is the overreach that I'm concerned about. And anything we can do in this community to build tools that allow people to build solutions that are going to counter that, I think is a very important thing, as you were saying, for human rights and for privacy in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm totally with you there. I think it's really important to frankly get people using this. I think financial privacy is pretty important to many people for not even nefarious purposes, just day to day. So I guess maybe kind of shifting gears on a technical level, because you guys are both in the space. You have different approaches. I think some obviously some overlap and philosophically are aligned here. You know, Roman, I kind of want to turn this to you. What's the best approach in keeping transactions private? Obviously, I think, you know, this is, you have your own approach at Tornado Cash, but there's like this idea of mixers, zero knowledge proof, private chain, which I remember like years ago being like what every bank wanted. Although now I feel like that conversation has shifted a little. Zcash, and of those kind of different approaches, what do you think is the best? What's the advantage to that approach? And the advantage of non-custodial solutions in general, I think would be helpful for folks.
Sure. So here is how I see the future of privacy for blockchain technologies. So as you probably know, Tornado Cash is only focused to bring privacy to the Ethereum network. But luckily, there are already some other technologies available that could be utilized to make it happen. So for example, we look closely at Zcash and Wasabi Wallet. Zcash is its own blockchain that utilizes zero knowledge proofs. So you can actually send like shielded transactions using Zcash, but it doesn't support Ethereum, so it's their own chain. And Wasabi Wallet, it's the wallet that enables privacy for Bitcoin network. So we see those two technologies as like a very successful technologies for privacy markets, but we believe that Ethereum is the most utilized blockchain at this moment, but it just lacks the privacy solutions on the market. So the best scenario, in my opinion, if we can combine the user experience of Wasabi Wallet with the power of Zcash technology under the hood, we would, and to bring it to the Ethereum blockchain, I think that would be the ideal scenario at this moment. So we could have like truly privacy-oriented wallet with a very simple UI, and that allow people to send fully shielded transactions. That's what we are working right now on Tornado Cash V3 as a next version.
Congrats, by the way.
Yeah.
Roman, are you taking advantage of the work that Zk the Starkware team did for the Ethereum Foundation recently? I know they received a grant for that.
As I believe, like, yeah, we work closely at Starkware. I think they're doing some amazing things, and
yeah,
I'm not really. Last time I checked, it wasn't like a mainnet ready solution that we can already use and utilize. So we're always looking for like some cutting edge technologies that can work on mainnet. And if there is something that can help us achieve our goals, we would always give it a try.
Yeah, we should talk. I'd like to chat about some of the things we've been thinking about on that level. Yeah, so just a little kind of refresher. I actually was seed investor in Zcash when I was running a venture fund at Pantera Capital, so I was very familiar with that crew, and I know the Starkware team very well. So been thinking a lot about these issues. We're focused on a different thing with Orchid. We're focused on network level privacy. And the thing we think a lot about is not just that one thing, but just kind of a very holistic approach to what are all the pieces of information that could expose you in different ways. And we chatted to Zcash and so on about like how combinations of VPNs and different approaches. I know they're working on some layered encryption approaches now also. There's a lot of interesting things here, even within mixed nets, that you get into issues with timing attacks and kind of like exactly how many people are in the mix pool and so on. So there's a lot of nuances that I think are still yet to be really figured out, to have, as Roman was saying, a kind of a very easy user experience that you can just press a button and assume that you're okay. Right now, it's like you're kind of rolling your own and you're hoping for the best a little bit. We're not really there with general approaches or developer tools, but I think it's exciting that there is so much focus on these issues, and we're certainly excited to be funded as a company that gets privacy, which is what we do.
That's great. It's really important. So yeah, and I love that Chainlink is bringing people together. So it's great that you guys are going to connect after. So I also just wanted to add in, and you mentioned this a little bit before, Stephen, but I think both Tornado Cash and thought a lot about VPNs and where VPNs may fit into the equation here. I think it's just great to hear from you, Stephen, first, you mentioned this earlier, but it would be great just to kind of hear where that fits in for Orchid.
Yeah, so within aspects of trying to make a private transaction, there's a number of things you've got to think through. It's not just making sure that the payment transaction is private. You've also got to think about what information you're exposing when you're doing your transaction on the network. And so that they're two kind of quite complementary things. They need to be, as we were talking, need to be kind of connected and used in the right kind of way. The VPN space is a very strange space. There's a lot of players, and it's hard to which one you would choose. There's not like a kind of a Google of the VPN space. So that was one of the observations we had, and why we developed something where we don't actually run a VPN. We're providing the smart contracts and the clients and the server code. What we provide on our client, excuse me, is a client that allows you to create circuits using different nodes in the network and stringing them together to increase the privacy. And our focus is really on providing.
I think I may have lost you a little bit, Stephen. Okay.
Yeah, I lost you for a minute, and I'm just. It was a private transaction that was.
Okay. Okay. Cool. I guess, Roman, I wanted to. I don't know, Stephen, if you had anything else to add. I didn't catch the last bit there, but feel free. If not, Roman.
He's probably using VPN. That's fine.
Okay. Roman, did you want to add anything there?
No, I completely agree that whenever you interact with the internet itself, like you have to be aware of what kind of information you are exposing about yourself. I mean, if you are concerned about your personal privacy on the internet. So for example, when it comes to blockchain or DApps on Ethereum, there are a number of things, like you can like open any DApp and analyze what network requests this particular application sends. Because it is important, like if the DApp interacts with some third-party services, that also means that those third-party services, they can capture all the logs about yourself, like that you are interacting with them. And so there are a number of solutions that people can use. They can use VPN and Tor to hide the IP information. They can use some incognito mode window in Chrome to never store any like session cookies and data. For Ethereum dApps, you can choose which RPC servers you trust to interact with. Like if you're using some publicly available RPC service, you have to assume they are collecting data about you. And it also comes to like any like gas price oracles or basically any network service.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. So I guess, now that, we are at the Chainlink Smart Contract Summit, after all, it'd be great to kind of, based on your technical roadmaps, I'm not sure if either of you have incorporated Oracle, specifically Chainlink, but it'd be helpful to understand how that plays into your underlying architecture and really the importance of that in your smart contracts. So feel free, whoever wants to take the question first, but I think that'd be helpful to understand.
So right now on mainnet, Tornado Cash is using Chainlink in the following way. Like, so when you go to Tornado Cash, we have to know what's the current market price for the gas price in order to have a best user experience. So user doesn't have to like think about it. And there are a few ways to achieve that problem. Like you can either ask some off-chain gas price oracles, or you can use Chainlink to get this data from on-chain. When I say on-chain, it's basically Chainlink has the smart contract that anybody can call to get the latest gas price oracle data. Why is it important for Tornado Cash? It solves a few problems. The first problem: what if all the off-chain gas price oracles went down? Then like we can only rely on the on-chain ones. So that's great. So it solves the problem that availability, like service availability for Tornado Cash. The second problem that it solves is for privacy reasons. So let's say you don't want to interact with all those network requests for gas price oracles. You don't want to trust them because you might think they will collect your data. So in that case, you can set your own RPC URL that you trust, and that will fetch the data from the gas price oracle provided by Chainlink. That's it.
Awesome. That's it. Sounds like a lot.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, sure. So I've actually I've known Sergey since 2015, back in when it was just called Smart Contract, and been close with him ever since. And we connected late last year, early this year, to talk about a couple of different ideas. We're also incorporating them in a number of different ways. Like the gas cost issue is something we're focused on also. One of the things we use it for and are working on is basically like a federated request network in order to get pricing data on bandwidth. So our nodes in our network all price their information about how much bandwidth costs, and being able to use Chainlink and oracles in those ways and kind of basically like a federated model, so there's more decentralization, is the approach that we've taken with them. And there's a lot of other things we've been looking at doing with them in the future too.
Awesome. Yeah, very smart of them to trademark smart contract back then, I've got to say. It's a good one. So I guess just last, I know that we don't have a ton of time left here, but I did just want to add, what's next for your project? How do you further embark on helping privacy when it comes to blockchains? Anything exciting, teasers you could share with those listening?
I think like right now we're like, in order to have like really cool privacy world on blockchain, I think it's like two-step approach. The first step is just solve the simple use cases. How do we send transactions privately on Ethereum, of course? And the second problem, like, how do we build private smart contracts? What I mean by that, like, right now, all the smart contracts that on Ethereum, they are not designed with the privacy in mind. So if we could figure out how to make it happen, like so that I can send a private transaction to a smart contract. For example, let's say there is a private compound pool, and to earn some like yield or something and return it back without exposing my information. I think that would be epic for as a next step for the blockchain technology.
That sounds great.
Yeah, so we kind of shy away from roadmaps as a company, but as a project. But the thing that we're really excited about with the community is essentially the vision of more decentralized services, so different kinds of decentralized services, all of which would have the kind of basic privacy layer that we built into everything else, and scaling those with nanopayments. So VPN was number one. We're looking at lots of different opportunities.
Awesome. Cool. And I guess just last thing, do you guys have like a Twitter handle folks can follow or reach you at?
Sure. Tornado Cash on Twitter.
Awesome.
We are at Orchid Protocol.
Perfect.
On Twitter.
And thank you both for your time. I think this is a really interesting conversation, and look forward to really seeing how that develops.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's been lovely.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck with the rest of the conference.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks, Priyanka, for doing that, and really excited to keep this moving. I would like to, the next topic is ETH 2.0. What's being built, how is it being built, how the current builders on 1.0 are planning to support it moving forward. Got Hudson Jameson. He's going to moderate this panel and let us know what's exactly happening with ETH 2.0. Thanks, Hudson.
Thanks, Dustin. Good to see you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the panel. We got some great panelists today, and I'm really, really excited about the topic. ETH2's very hot and sexy right now. And let's go ahead and just dive into it. As a quick intro to myself, I'm Hudson Jameson. I work at the Ethereum Foundation as a community manager and also as a dev liaison to low-level protocol developers in ETH 1.0, amongst a number of other things I just randomly do in the ecosystem. I also advise Chainlink, so some people might know me from that. Let's go through an intro to the panelists. We'll start with Yaniv, and then we'll go Danny, and then Guillaume.
Yeah, so fun fact, I actually heard about Chainlink when they were doing their ICO, specifically because you had mentioned them publicly. So you were my on-ramp onto Chainlink.
Nice.
But, yeah, so I'm Yaniv. I'm the co-founder, project lead at The Graph. We're a protocol for organizing and indexing all of the data on Ethereum, IPFS, and other networks soon, and making that data easily accessible to applications via GraphQL.
Great, Danny.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm Danny Ryan. I work at the Ethereum Foundation on the research team, working a lot on the ETH2 project on this research, spec writing, and a lot of coordination on various components of the project. Thanks for having me.
Guillaume.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Guillaume. So I'm working with the Go Ethereum team, so at the Ethereum Foundation, and recently, so mostly on ETH 1x stuff. And recently started looking into how to help the ETH2 effort with my guest knowledge.
Excellent. Thank you all. All right, let's hop into this. First of all, I think most people can look up a lot in ETH2 is that's out there, but a lot of people don't know about how ETH1 is going to merge into ETH2. I know there's been some iterations of plans around that. So Danny, can you give us a high-level overview of the current plan to merge or, I guess, transition ETH1 into ETH2?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of context and framing that I think would be useful. So what ETH2 is really like a highly sophisticated consensus mechanism It's planned to be an upgrade for Ethereum's consensus. It's a migration to proof of stake, as well as a sharded model to handle more capacity than the single chain of Ethereum today. In that framing, what we think of as Ethereum today, or what is often called ETH1, essentially becomes one of those shard chains. So on the current trajectory and current path, we're kind of bootstrapping this new consensus, what we call ETH2, with all the validators and the beacon chain. And sooner rather than later, ETH1 hot swaps its proof of work consensus for that of ETH2, so that the validators are building the chain, validators are validating things, and building what is ETH1 as a shard chain amongst many. So that's the high-level overview on what's going on and kind of the framing here. They're often thought of as different projects. They're often thought of as like this kind of sequential, ETH1, ETH2, one's better than the other, that kind of stuff. But that's not really, it's more like, you know, we're building this new consensus mechanism for the existing chain and existing community.
Great explanation there. I want to move this into kind of the tooling, demos, and simulations around that, since we're on the topic of ETH1 to ETH2. And I know, Guillaume, you have been helping with this, especially with your Catalyst project. Can you kind of explain what that is and any other kind of tooling or simulations that are out there right now people can check out?
Sure. I mean, I don't know all of the tooling and simulation, but the one I'm mostly concerned with is, so it's Mikhail Kalinin from TXRX. He started taking the spec and building some simulation framework to see how the phase one would take place. So phase one, ETH2 is supposed to arrive in 3 phases. There's the phase 0 that is almost almost ready to ship, and then the next step is phase 1. That's when you take the ETH1 chain and you turn it into a shard for ETH2. And so in order to build something that would resemble reality, he needed something that would simulate the chain and like the ETH1 chain, and why not take gas to build this, to simulate it. So what I took was gas and I turned it into Catalyst, which is just a big hack at the moment to make gas behave like it should be behaving when it's the driving engine of a shard, the ETH1 engine. And yeah, so it's just at the moment it's just a couple shards, a couple hacks into gas, and the goal is to modularize gas and put the bits of gas that will be needed where in the future on different shards, be able to reuse those components basically.
Interesting. So I think we've mentioned sharding a few times already. I want to bring this to Yaniv and then anyone else who wants to comment afterwards. Where on this like sharding versus like layer 2 and just what does this all mean for like devs, dApp devs, and smart contract creators when it comes to like sharded chains? What have you seen, or what feedback have you received on that at all, Yaniv?
Yeah, so today a lot of teams kind of outsource their Ethereum node management to third parties, and because it does take a fair amount of work just to even run a full node or an archive node, and that's just on a single chain with a single shard. So I think that's going to become just a lot more complex once you start talking about multiple shards and layer 2. Obviously gas prices are getting really expensive on Ethereum, and I think people are already looking at like what layer 2s they want to start migrating to. Maybe some of those workloads will move back to shards on the main chain, in ETH2. So one of the projects that I think is really interesting there is Optimism, and they did a demo of Synthetics running on their layer 2, and that was powered by the graph because Synthetics has a subgraph for getting the data from the chain, since you need to process all of that data before you can show it to the UI. So they had already done that work, and then they were able to run that subgraph just seamlessly without having to do any work on top of Optimism. And I think you're going to want to see those types of abstraction layers like the graph that makes just interacting with the underlying chain a lot simpler. And that really applies to layer 2 as well as shards, because ultimately developers building applications shouldn't have to think about which shard is this contract living on, which layer 2 solution. It's really just kind of an optimization. And it's the same way that in the traditional web development world, you have specialization between like the database engineers that are optimizing for performance, and maybe they're structuring their tables so that they can efficiently access data. And that's just very different from the type of work that applications are doing, where they're just using APIs and they're thinking in terms of like, what do we want to show the users? And so I think it's going to be important for developers to think about those abstractions. So the smart contract engineer focus on optimizing access on chain, where state and computation is really expensive, and then application developers don't have to think at all about where the data is residing, and they can just use something like the graph for just querying that data and making it available.
Yeah, I very much agree. Like abstraction and handling complexity is going to be incredibly important. We've been working on it in non-blockchain environments for years. The async models are continuing to evolve, and programmers are kind of being able to handle these things. But we need to start thinking about it now. To piggyback on something that Yaniv said, layer 2 optimism are these layer 2s we call rollups that scale with the amount of layer 1 data, the amount of layer 1 chain data. And one of the cool things that we get with ETH2 is, first and foremost, it's a data availability machine. It can come to consensus on a lot of different data in the form of these many shard chains. And so we're excited to see the layer 2 rollup ecosystem develop over the coming year, and begin to leverage the highly scalable data layer of ETH2. So for example, I've talked to the guys at Optimism, and they're considering models of, okay, if we have 5 shard chains worth of data that we want to have into our Optimism chain, can we thread these chains and kind of expose a single chain paradigm, a highly scalable single chain paradigm, threaded across this layer 1 data? So lots of cool stuff there. And just to point out that the layer 2 movement, I think, really complements a lot of the work going on in ETH2.
That's interesting. So when these dApps, I know that you said ETH1 is going to become a shard, basically, or it's going to be taken in like that. Is there going to be any interruption to like dApps during this kind of transition that happens? Is it going to be just like an instant, like a second going in, or like how does that work on a dApp dev level?
Guillaume, we've recently kind of been talking about this. Your thoughts?
Yes. I mean, regarding the interruption itself, it would make sense when the transition itself happens to, this is not the first time we're talking about this, not just in the context of ETH2, also in the context of ETH1X, stopping, modifying the ETH1 protocol just to block all transactions for let's say 1 hour. That's not something that would be too disruptive. This being said, our goal is mostly to try to keep operations running, but I would expect anyway people to be a bit conservative and cautious, and not send transactions, while the thing is happening. And honestly, I don't expect honest actors to send any transactions while this is happening. If we see a lot of transactions, that's most likely a hack or an attack, more exactly.
Or the arbitrage bots.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite like the simplest thing you can think of is at some time or some condition, if you're running Geth and it's following the proof of work as the consensus, instead of pointing to proof of work and being driven by that model, it points to the beacon chain that's driven by that model. But the actual complexities as to what that looks like, what conditions are actually triggering it, and any potential attacks on that time frame, that's the kind of stuff that we're beginning to investigate now, since we have a kind of a core demo in place.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So ETH1 going into a shard, I will it continue for years and years to come? Can there be like everyone move over by this date into ETH2, or is this kind of just going to exist in perpetuity?
The plan, because of like the framing of the hot swap of the consensus of the existing Ethereum chain for ETH2's consensus, the idea is that there's not really a migration. If you're running the software that's aware of this planned fork, essentially, of the consensus, which we believe most of the community would, then you're just essentially, that chain is running. That chain is now running underneath ETH2's consensus, and there's probably some modified opcodes where you could become aware of things in the beacon chain, and over time, probably opcodes that expose a sharded functionality. The idea is that there's not this migration path that we have to like convince users to slowly migrate applications over. The idea is for applications to continue to exist in this just new environment.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And
okay.
if I just may add, yeah, we kind of want to keep the chain running a little bit anyway, because there might be an issue like during the migration. You know, we want to be able to revert and fix and try again. So anyway, we need to keep the chain running for a bit of time, and then people, you know, some people are conservatives and they just don't want to try new stuff. And we're talking about $1 billion ecosystem. Some people will just have some interest not to merge, so they will keep running forever, and then they will. Problem Ethereum Classic is having. They have to maintain the software because presumably all the engineers will move on to ETH2 and not care about the old chain. So can it run forever? Yes, I'm sure people will try to make it run. You know, then it requires some technical capabilities and some investment. And the question is, are people willing to put that effort?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So Yaniv, with the graph, you know, it's something that you can like utilize tools like GraphQL to like see your data a lot more clearly, right? So how does that work when there are like massive, like I guess during a transition like this, there's going to be a lot of traffic. How do you deal with like a lot of traffic on the chain at once? I was kind of wondering about that. Like, does it just pick up and store things like on a centralized database, or are you connecting directly to a blockchain node, or what?
Yeah, so we have these roles that we call indexers, or it's a role, that are running graph nodes. And those graph nodes do all of this data processing. And you deploy what's called a subgraph to the graph, which specifies how to index some subset of data. So maybe you're interested in just like the Chainlink smart contracts. And so it's going to scan the chain, find any transactions against the Chainlink smart contracts, and then you can tell it how to process and ingest that data. That goes into a local store and then is served up over GraphQL. So the indexing is very resource intensive. And then once you've built up that store, you can efficiently serve queries for applications. You know, if there's a lot of transactions, that's going to add a lot of work to that indexing. And if there's a lot of people are like loading screens and different apps because they want to see what's going on, that's going to cause a lot of query volume. But you know, we've already scaled to, you know, we're now handling well over 100 million queries a day just on our hosted service. And you know, we've started our test net. Where we're going to be onboarding a lot of external indexers that's going to scale the query throughput and capacity a lot more. So it should be, you know, more than able to handle that type of load.
That actually brings me to a really good next question I wrote down. Thank you for the transition. Test nets. So the graph has test nets, and then on ETH2 we also have Medasha, commonly referred to as Medallia because of the spelling, but it's Medasha apparently. And there's a lot of learnings that came from, you know, Medasha I know about. I'm less familiar with the graphs test nets, but what can you kind of describe how these were set up, lessons learned, that kind of thing? And Yaniv, you can start with the graphs testnet if you want.
Yeah, sure. So we've been running mission control now for a few weeks, and we just announced that we had over 500 registrations by indexers that want to run nodes on the network, and over 200 of them were able to actually get their graph nodes up and running, which we're really happy about. I'm sure as you guys have seen the same thing, running a testnet is, an extremely intensive process. There's just so much coordination, more so than you would even think. But I think it's really important. Obviously, you have to test the software ahead of the network launch, and look for vulnerabilities and all of those kinds of things that I think are very well kind of understood. But then there's this whole other aspect of the kind of community building with the node operators. And for us, we've had a pretty vibrant community in Discord of developers that have been building on the graph since they've been doing that for about 2 years now, that we've been out. But now for the first time, you're also having this channel where if you go to our Discord, you can see our indexers channel where all of these indexers are figuring out how to run the nodes, and they're helping each other when they get stuck. And it's interesting to have both suppliers and consumers as part of the same kind of community. A lot of times, it's kind of this, it's either competitive between the suppliers or even, between the consumers and the providers. But, with this Web3 infrastructure, it's all open, right? And, anybody can run a node, anybody can be a consumer. These conversations are public. And so, I think it's really cool to see the types of communities that then form where you understand, these suppliers need to be profitable, but they're providing a service, and you can see in the same place what kinds of needs the consumers have, and then and you can organize around that. And so I think that the community building, there's a lot of path dependence, I feel that happens when you're launching a network. You can't just snap your fingers and suddenly there's a big vibrant network. And so the way that kind of grows organically, and you get the community through those steps, I think is really critical.
Yeah, Danny or Guillaume?
Yeah, so we've had a series of test nets over the past many months, I guess since near the start of the year, in preparation for the Phase 0 ETH2 launch. And a few weeks ago, we launched Medallia, whatever you want to call it, testnet, which is supposed to be the final testnet before the Phase 0 launch. And this, we've seen a ton of the community show up and do this, run this with us. There's over 1,000 nodes in the network. There are the equivalent of 1.1 million testnet ETH validating in it. And for a bit, it was smooth sailing until a few weeks ago. And it's kind of a push and pull on these testnets. Is a quiet testnet from the technical perspective, is that what you want? Or do you want shit to blow up? Obviously, you probably don't want shit to blow up on mainnet. I mean, you don't. So if it's going to blow up, might as well blow up in Medasha. So we had a fun time skew bug with one of the majority clients a few weeks ago, which highlighted a number of other stressors, like when your chain is forking a ton, running the fork choice, trying to sync, put some really interesting stresses on all the clients. So we got to run through the ringer of it, but clients have hardened themselves quite a bit, and the testnet resolved, and things generally worked as intended, even though kind of a crazy scenario emerged. So anyway, we're keeping our eye towards mainnet. People are continuing to harden, a lot of audits and things. And on the community side, just a huge shout out to the ETH staker community. They started as a Reddit, and now exists as a Discord, and it's been really, really cool to see. I hop in there and help people when I can, but the community is kind of each other. People are sharing hardware specs and debugging and asking for tips and tricks. So that's the kind of stuff that gets me fired up, is seeing the community engage and actually dig into the stuff. So that's the state of the testnet. Things at this point are going really well, and we're eyeballing mainnet launch.
Yeah, and if I could just add, really good job by everybody involved, because my experience is more on the ETH1X side. It's building a multi-client testnet is a nightmare, and yeah, that's a really good job. I'm really impressed.
In Ethereum, we choose to do things the difficult way. And instead of just having a single implementation, we say, no, it's a protocol, and we can have many implementations. Not only can we have, but we promote having them, which is awesome from many respects. It gives you a lot of redundancy. It brings a lot of more people to the table. It opens up like all sorts of developer ecosystems. I think it's like a superpower of Ethereum, but it can make coordination overhead and just the technical overhead compound in various ways. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. The ETH Staker community has been amazing. I participated in one of the test nets, and it was just a really fun time. I highly recommend if people want to jump in there. It's not too hard to do, and it's a really cool learning experience. Guillaume, you made Catalyst to help out the effort from the ETH1 to ETH2 merger. What was the most difficult part of doing that, in your opinion? Like, was there anything like a technical boundary or anything that was like complicated that you had to overcome?
No, not. I mean, yes. In my opinion, there were lots of difficult things. I think, thankfully, I'm not the one who had to deal with them. It's mostly, in my opinion, the whole simulation. Very.
Oh, I think we're losing you, Guillaume. Wait, I think you're almost back.
Yeah, German internet. Sorry for that. Can you guys hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah. So I was. Where was I? Yeah, I was saying most of the hard work has been done by someone else. But when it came to Catalyst, yeah, there's been a little bit of tweaks. Like, this is something that is really optimized for. We're talking about a very optimized machinery that is really designed to process the ETH1 block. So when you try to remove a little bit of a break, so that's why I'm saying it's pretty hacky. We're gonna have to do some refactoring in the future. That's not going to be very, very fun, but at least with the recent demo, we see where this is going. So it's pretty exciting, and therefore it will make it more fun, I think.
Cool. Last question before we wrap up, and I have you all shill something, so get ready for that, whatever you want to shill in your Twitter accounts and such. Danny, I know that there's like phase 0, 1, and 2 that we talk about a lot. What's after that? Like, what is the far future for Ethereum? Is there phase 3 and 4? Like, is that like mystery now?
Yeah. So, I mean, once we get to like what we call phase 1.5 or phase 2, Ethereum is going to be hella scalable and secure in this new proof of stake environment. And I think it's going to be, it can at that point ossify and be like a fantastic tool, like global tool. But there are a few things that are probably worth discussing. One is quantum security. So all of the components of E2 have been selected to either be quantum secure or to have known quantum secure analogs that we could swap to in like the 5 to 10 year time horizon. So I think that it would be prudent to 5 to 10 years. And another thing is general purpose zero knowledge proofs, especially in the SARCs that don't require trusted setups. There's probably going to be some really, really exciting stuff that happens in the next 3 to 5 years. So we're going to be keeping our eye on that. For example, succinct fraud proofs. So you could up the security by not only validators making commitments to things, but if they committed to things that were invalid, you can make fraud proofs about them. Or you could really up the light client game by submitting proofs of computation so that you could very cheaply churn through the blockchain, get to the head, and then make requests about the state. So there's a lot of interesting things to do, but through phase 2, I think will be sufficient for like kind of the load that we're looking to support.
Great answer. That's very interesting. All right, we're going to go through. We have a minute left, so very quickly, I'll start with Yaniv, and then Guillaume, and then Danny. Go ahead and shill whatever you want to shill, and give your Twitter handle for where people can find you, or a website. I don't care.
Okay, yeah, our website's thegraph.com. You can sign up for our mailing list there. We're at Graph Protocol on Twitter. I'm at Yaniv Graph on Twitter, and I'd love for you guys to follow us there, join our Discord, get involved with our testnet and our road to mainnet launch.
Okay, Guillaume.
Yes. Well, just try to contribute. I know East 2 is very exciting, but also East 1 is still needing some love. So feel free to drop by github.com/ethereum/go-ethereum and open a PR. We're slow to respond, but we appreciate them.
Awesome. And the I can't hear anything anymore.
Oh, I said finally,
Great.
Danny.
Yeah. I will show my cat, Tycho.
Oh, yes.
On top of that, yeah, I'll show stateless Ethereum. Stateless Ethereum, the ETH1X stuff is complementary to everything we're doing in ETH2. If we can get to that stateless milestone, then we can scale computation and state much more attractively across all these shards. And so really the way I think about it is ETH2 is kind of like the system layer, whereas what we think of as ETH1 is more like the user state transaction layer. And we're pushing on both fronts. So that's all I got.
Word.
All right. Thank you all so much. And I think with that, we're going to get kicked off of here by Dustin. Yep. So thanks to the panelists. Thanks, Chainlink. Thanks, everybody. You can find me at Hudson Jameson on Twitter, and Danny's on there too somewhere.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Hey, Steve, can you hear anything?
Not yet.
Okay.
I think it's maybe part of the process.
Okay.
Danny's just having, or sorry, Dustin's just having an issue with his mic. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Awesome. Hey, Dustin, I'm going to take over for you here. Perfect. And then Antonio, if you're here with us, if you could share your screen, that'd be greatly appreciated. Share your audio and video, and I'll give you access here so you can join this panel. Perfect. Here he is. So let me just get this set up here. Just one moment. All right, perfect. So this panel is a once-in-a-generational shift to digital business networks. So again, we have Steve Cervini, Antonio Senator, and Sophia Lopez. I'll let everybody introduce yourself and let you guys kind of get started. Thank you so much for joining us at SmartCon. Really excited for this one. Take it away.
Great. I guess I'll kick us off. I think I'm mostly going to be serving in a moderator role today. I think this is a real privilege to be here with Antonio Senatore, the global blockchain CTO for Deloitte, and Steve Cervini, the founder and CEO of Kaleido, both of whom have been in the enterprise blockchain space from the very beginning, which is half decade now, and have a lot of insights to share on the state of enterprise adoption and this once in a generation shift that's happening in the enterprise space. It gets just what you say.
Time flies.
It does. We have about 20 minutes, so I think I'll just start with some questions to help bring the audience into this topic. Antonio, it might be helpful for people to get your perspective on digital business networks. What is a digital business network? It's sometimes called a consortia or enterprise ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a network of businesses, yes, that are, it's a peer-to-peer-ish network of businesses. Means that it's the first time, basically, in the history of technology and businesses where actually we can see a network of a peer-to-peer network of businesses with the main goal of exchanging data and digital assets. Now, why that is a big deal? Why that? Well, we get into a stage where businesses are going to look at cooperation rather than competition. They're going to look at things like, okay, let's bring all our capabilities together and see how we can serve the market better. it brings insights for the market that they're operating into that they could have never been seen before. Listen, Sophia, I recently read an article which I'm going to pass to this group of people, on LinkedIn, where there was an interesting point, one use case which was beautiful. How can blockchain and AI work together? So imagine business networks. One of the main problems that each business has when it comes to AI, for instance, is the long tail problem, which means your inability to deal with outliers and edge cases. Imagine a network of businesses where other businesses have that data that you don't actually have, and you can learn from them, and you can offer their service, and then you can improve your services, and then you can also improve their services. And for the client, that digital experience becomes totally different. It's a little bit like opening markets again, and the opportunities are infinite. So definitely a big deal. As I said, peer-to-peer networks-ish, because yes, the aim is that they become peer-to-peer, but governance is always a big thing there. It's always I would say even a risk factor for the success of those. Is probably the most difficult thing to get it right. But definitely it's a once in a lifetime thing, like once in a generation thing. I mean, I never heard of that before, except when I started doing this job for Deloitte, which was over 4 years ago.
Yeah, thanks, Antonio. So from the companies themselves, and as you said, it's a big deal. Steve,
Yes.
would you like to add a little bit more? I know from all of your conversations with these consortia, why is it a big deal? Why is the shift happening? And it'd be interesting if you throw a little of a twist of how COVID has potentially impacted this as well in the last 6 months.
Yeah, well, if you think about it from an enterprise perspective, digitization is probably the theme of this decade, right? And COVID has really brought what we who've spent our careers in enterprise IT have known, the challenges that exist, that COVID has brought that mainstream, right? So everyone understands now just how brittle our supply chains are, right? When toilet paper disappears from the shelves, or when you get bad batches of PPE flowing through and into end consumers' hands, and on and on and on. And so this digitization can help us uniquely solve these really hard problems that exist in the physical world. And so when you talk about a digital business network, first, what's a business network, right? It's, no company exists in a vacuum. Every company, I have friends on Facebook. Well, companies have more friends than I have, right? We call them an ecosystem. We call them a consortium. In the banking sector, there are counterparties to every transaction. In manufacturing, there are supply chains. And so, this is really, in my view, one of the largest untapped areas in the enterprise IT sector that hasn't truly been digitized. And it hasn't been digitized because of the multi-party problem, right? It's the hardest problem to solve because you have to bring a set of organizations together, and that business process, that transaction flow, you actually need humans and organizations around the same table to solve these problems that we know exist across the board. And this is, across all major industry sectors, we see these use cases. And Antonio, you work with those on a day-to-day basis. So that's what we mean when we say it's huge. We're talking about the core processes that drive enterprises themselves. Salesforce was great for customers, and Workday was great, was a revolution for HR. But the custom apps that businesses really run on, those processes, which almost always we find are in a network of other businesses, haven't been truly digitized. So to me, that's what digital business networks means.
So we're, as I mentioned at the top of the conversation, we're about a half decade in now. What are some of the things that you both have observed with the winning networks as they move into production? You know, what do they really need to be successful as they're reinventing these enterprise supply chains and back office business processes?
Yeah, there are a few things. I mean, in Deloitte, we've always been talking about platforms, so building platforms. So think about business networks, digital business networks as platforms. So the most successful ones that we have seen are those that actually have enabled, you know, organization within the business, clients, etc., to build on top of that. That idea of saying, you know what, it's a network of businesses. We're gonna, you know, give the liberty of defining what is that you want to transact, what is the digital asset that you want to create. So give that freedom of growing the network use cases rather than forcing through the network use cases. And that is something that we have noticed lately. You know, we have seen lots of network in the early days. Sophia, you mentioned we are at half of a decade, so literally 4 or 5 years ago, where for network they say, hey, I can solve this problem. And that's what the network does. Fine, but that's probably not everybody's problem. So one of the greatest things that we have seen is really the fact that those networks can enable clients, users, peers, whatever we want to call them, to build on top of what is out there or what is there in the platform. So great platforms, and that usually something is successful. I always say that when it goes when the use of it, the use of the platform, the use of the network goes beyond what was taught at the beginning. So it goes beyond what you think it should have been done, it goes beyond the initial design and the initial thinking. Actually, people build on top with new ideas and new things. That's one of the key criteria for me of a successful business network. Of course, there are others. You know, there's the successful governance. There is definitely a successful and a lot of thinking around regulation, privacy, GDPR, like literally the new vehicles of business network. They call them in many ways consortiums. The first question that is now coming to the table is data, privacy, and even where the nodes are running, where data is stored, where computation is made. So it seems that in these past 5 years, you know, a few mistakes have been made, a few small wins, but it seems that the criteria of success now are clear to everyone. Build platforms, focus on platform, look at regulation, let the others enable more use cases, don't force into use cases, and figure out a governance that enables the network to grow and not to shrink. Basically, that would be a good one.
Steve, do you have any insights to share from what we've seen from successful networks who've been able to get into production?
Yeah, well, I think not boiling the ocean is one that comes to mind pretty quickly. Right up there near the top is don't get stuck in the plumbing layers. Look for technology consulting partners to help accelerate. These are the things that we do all day long. Typically, a group of organizations come with a business problem, and at the end of the day, what they care about is the app, the thing that solves the business problem. And the rest of the plumbing, they're looking for something that is enterprise grade and meets their requirements, both from a solution architecture perspective as well as from a robustness of the underlying infrastructure. And so I would say now at 2020, we have a lot of answers that we didn't have several years ago. Open source protocols and communities have been evolving rapidly. With Kaleido, we've worked with a number of those communities. Just to throw out a few, Ethereum, Hyperledger, Chainlink. We've been partnering with Chainlink for almost 2 years. As I said in the chat a minute ago, we're huge fans of Chainlink's technology, both the quality of it, also the problem that it's solving. So it's sort of a right tool for the right job. I think we've been saying for many years, blockchain is a team sport. So on the one hand, it's a little bit of a dichotomy because you think decentralized, but actually from a business perspective, it's all about collaboration. And so that's a really interesting thing. So a team sport is not just the other members of the network. We've seen some big players try to say, hey, come join my network. Well, no one wants to do that. They do want to join a decentralized solution. But it takes a lot of people together at the table. And it takes, an understanding about the plumbing and the right quality of the plumbing, but the right partners can really help get you there and can help accelerate. We've seen, for example, a group of global banks and large Fortune 100 companies that we've worked with get into production in 6 months. That's unheard of. We've seen other blockchain projects spend 5 years and not be in production yet. So there is a really big, set of a distribution of outcomes, shall we say. Some of these choices are really, really important about the technologies you use and the partners that you work with. And also staying true to your mission, where I started the question around the application and focusing on the business outcome. Bring those unique insights that you have to the table and let others help you with some of these other problems that we've seen over and over again.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, the final question is really looking at predictions for enterprise blockchain in the next year and even more broadly into the next decade. I know Deloitte does a lot of research on this, Antonio, so I don't know if you have a few thoughts to share on that topic. And
there is our Deloitte survey, which is published for everyone to see. But I want to say something we've been seeing in the past few months, and it goes with what Steve said a few minutes ago. Supply chain is going to be a big play. It's digitalization of physical assets, tracking, understanding where your supply is, where everything is, where everything comes from, along with carbon footprint, is going to be the thing of the next few years, between now and 5 years, accelerated by COVID, of course. I mean, we have seen an acceleration which is immense, and that's because you no longer want to see the toilet paper not on the shelves. And it's simple. And yet, Steve, and Sophia, this is something we've been talking about with clients for many years now, that our supply chain was broken because there were all silo systems with lots of batch jobs running everywhere. And say, yeah, but I have a handle, on it. I know where my things is. I receive a report every week or so, and yet it's a report that is made up of nothing. It's data. And you don't really know. So that's going to be the biggest one now because of COVID. Definitely an acceleration that I would have thought would have happened in 10 years. 5 to 10 is probably 1 to 5 or even less. 1 to 2, 1 to 3. Of course, reorganizing supply chain is work for many years. There's digital twins. There's a lot of things to be done there. So it's an immense type of work. Another one that we're going to see definitely more adoption in public sector. Again, COVID will probably force self-sovereign data and digital identity because traveling in the next few years will probably become a different thing, and even participating to events or etc. So digital identity may become a big play with self-sovereign data, really, and of course decentralized finance. And digital assets in general, that word will take off, but that's probably for the 10 years part of your questions, Sophie.
Thanks for your predictions and some of the insights and trends. Steve, bring us home with your thoughts on some predictions for the next year and beyond.
Yeah, well, we've been told directly from people in industries that COVID is bringing a 10-year acceleration to their digital transformation strategy. So I'm not sure that's a prediction. I think that's happening right in front of our eyes. I think increasingly companies are turning to decentralized infrastructure and technology like blockchain technology. So I think I'll wrap up my final thoughts with a prediction in that space, and just share with everyone watching here what we're hearing from our clients, which is no more POCs, and the projects that they've started, they're under tremendous pressure to get those into production. So we're seeing that as well. I predict in the next year that we're going to see a lot more of these applications going live in production. And I think what was really interesting is a lot of these systems in phase 1 of production, they really run alongside the legacy systems. I predict in the years after this year, the next couple of years, we're going to start to see those legacy systems shut down. And then I think you really see the hockey stick of enterprise adoption and blockchain take off.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Love the work you guys are doing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Dustin.
All right. Well, moving on, we have by Ed Felton, CEO of Off-Chain Labs. He's also the chief scientist. He was also a former CTO of the White House. We're excited to learn more about off-chain computing, computation, and Chainlink. Ed, how you doing? All right, Ed. All right. Give us just 1 second. Ed will just is going to do a quick refresh, and we'll come right back. Where's everybody from? All right, Ed.
Yeah.
Everything
Great.
sounds good, look good? All right, let's get going.
I'm good to go. Hey, everybody. It's great to be here. I want to talk today about Arbitrum and what we're doing to make smart contracts scalable and trustless, to take the capabilities of smart contracts to a higher level than they've been at before. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing and how we're doing it. I'll talk about what problems Arbitrum is solving, and then I'm going to give you a peek into the technology that is just about to emerge in our lab, and I'll talk about a new version of Arbitrum that we are very close to releasing. So what we want from systems like this is pretty simple. We want to be able to run smart contracts. No big surprise at the Smart Contract Summit that we want to run smart contracts. Smart contracts let us run any computation. We want to do it trustlessly, of course. That's why we are on a decentralized system. Trustless meaning that you don't have to make any assumptions that any particular centralized party is going to behave the way that you hope they do. And of course, we want this to be scalable and low cost. So Ethereum is a great system, the starting point for a lot of this. Ethereum, it was the first really popular system that let you run smart contracts in a trustless way. But the big drawback of Ethereum, of course, is that it suffers for scalability and for cost. For scalability, Ethereum has a global gas limit which amounts to a fraction of one laptop of computing power that needs to be shared by everyone in the world who is using Ethereum. And of course, with that very limited scalability comes a high cost, because people have to bid for capacity within this very limited for this very limited resource. So Ethereum is great in what it can do, but it can't really do it at scale or at the cost we want. Arbitrum is designed to and does check all of these boxes. It gives you the same generality to run any smart contract you want as Ethereum. It provides trustlessness, meaning you make no additional security assumptions or trust assumptions beyond what you make on Ethereum, except that you have to trust yourself. But it provides this in a way that's much more scalable and much lower cost than Ethereum does. And I'll talk very specifically in a few minutes about how scalable, how low the cost can be, and how we achieve that. Now, there are, of course, other kinds of scalability solutions that are out there. But I first want to talk a little bit about how Arbitrum works. So an Arbitrum chain you can think of as being a blockchain. It contains a series of what we call assertions. You can think of those as blocks that record transactions that are occurring on the chain. But of course, the difference is that unlike a layer 1 system like Ethereum, not everything that happens is directly recorded on the Ethereum chain. So one of the important components, facts about Arbitrum, is that it runs on top of Ethereum. So I'll add the Ethereum chain down here at the bottom of the slide. And on top of the Ethereum chain, we run a couple of Ethereum smart contracts, the Arbitrum inbox contract and your chain's ARB rollup contract that manages a rollup chain on behalf of your Arbitrum chain. When I say your Arbitrum chain, I say that because there are and can be many Arbitrum chains. We don't believe in one chain to rule them all. We believe in different people having different chains so that you can get the advantage of scalability on each chain instead of everyone having to be crammed onto a single chain and competing for resources. Okay, so these components, basically what they do is pretty minimal. They notarize the progress of your Arbitrum chain, and they resolve any disputes that arise about what is the correct behavior of the Arbitrum chain. Arbitrum will guarantee you that the behavior of your chain will be correct, assuming that you are taking the necessary steps to make sure that that is correct. Now, a typical Arbitrum chain will have a set of validators. Validators, you could think of them as being like full nodes. Anyone can be a validator, and a validator's job is to track the progress of the chain and to challenge any false claims. If somebody makes a false assertion about what the chain would do, all you have to do is speak up and dispute that. The dispute resolution that runs in your chain's ARB rollup contract will manage the dispute, and you, as the person who's objecting to a false claim, will be able to win, and you'll be able to take a deposit from somebody else. Now, if this all sounds complicated, don't worry. We provide the software to do all of this in a free and open source way, and anyone can do this. Now, you can be a validator if you want, but you or some company or institution that sets up the chain may very well want to hire professional validators. For example, they could hire Chainlink nodes, and due to our partnership with Chainlink, that's a very easy thing to do. You can be a validator yourself. You can hire a Chainlink node. You can hire someone else. And the guarantee that we give you is as long as at least one validator is honest and paying attention, your chain will execute correctly and it will make progress. Okay, now we can compare this to what you get on certain other systems. So for example, so-called ZK or zero knowledge rollup systems. ZK rollup systems are trustless and scalable. They give good performance for simple transfers and other kinds of simple functionality, but they can't run general smart contracts. And the reason is that the zero knowledge proofs that they generate, that they need to generate, are just too complex for any kind of a general smart contract to handle. Alternatively, you could look at a system, a so-called sidechain system. These typically use a technology called BFT, Byzantine fault tolerance. And these BFT systems run smart contracts and can offer scalability and low cost, but they're not trustless. There's some committee of nodes who run each chain, and you have to make a very strong assumption about the honesty of that committee. You have to assume that more than 2/3 of the nodes in that committee are honest, otherwise you're out of luck. So Arbitrum, we think, hits the sweet spot in this area. Now, back in February, we released Arbitrum Beta 1 on Ethereum testnet. This is the Arbitrum which, if you went to our website yesterday, you would see as being the released version of Arbitrum. So let me talk a little bit about what it does. This is a system that lets you move the computation and storage of your smart contracts off-chain. So that's right, all the computation of your chain and all of the storage of it are moved off the main Ethereum chain, and only that sort of notarization and cheap dispute resolution runs on-chain. Arbitrum Beta 1 required minor changes to existing dApp code, only a few lines of code, not many changes. It ran a closed set of contracts on each chain. That is, when you launched a particular chain, you would provide the code for a set of contracts, and you could clone those contracts later, but you couldn't introduce new ones. Each chain had a sort of fixed functionality, which was created when it was launched. Arbitrum Beta 1 offered about a 10x cost advantage over Ethereum in total cost of operation, and it did that because of moving so much of computation and storage off-chain. And it offered up to 400 transactions per second for a Reddit-type workload. By that, I mean the kind of workload that Reddit put forth in their layer 2 scaling bake-off, which is going on right now. So that's kind of a typical workload involving keeping track of ownership of assets, moving assets around, minting and burning and trading and so on. That's Arbitrum Beta 1. Well, one of the things I'm here to talk about today is Arbitrum Beta 2, which we are going to be releasing very, very soon. Very soon. Watch your social media. Arbitrum Beta 2 is a big step forward, even from the Arbitrum that you've seen if you've been watching. So Arbitrum Beta 2 still moves computation and storage off-chain, and it's still fully trustless. So none of that changes. Whereas the previous version required minor changes to existing dApp code, the new version requires no changes. You can send literally the same ones and zeros that you would send to Ethereum to deploy a contract. You can use your existing MetaMask wallet or other kinds of tooling. We've achieved a level of compatibility that I think no other rollup system has achieved. And with no changes to existing dApp code, not only is it much easier to port applications, not only is it much easier to do integrations, but users can use their existing tooling like their existing wallets. Developers can use their existing deployment tools. Previously, we had a closed set of contracts on each chain. Arbitrum Beta 2, you can deploy any contract on any chain whenever you want. No limitations here, just like Ethereum. Write your own contract code, developers write their own. They can deploy it to any Arbitrum chain by sending the very same ones and zeros that they would send to deploy it on an Ethereum chain. So next, a 10x cost advantage over Ethereum. 10x is cool. What's even cooler is 100x. Arbitrum Beta 2 offers up to an additional order of magnitude cost advantage over Ethereum. And I'll talk a little bit about how we do that and how much difference that makes in a minute. Now, up to 400 TPS is cool, but again, what's even cooler is adding a zero to that. Arbitrum Beta 2 will allow Reddit-type workloads of what we think of as typical of a broad class of applications to scale up to about 4,000 transactions per second as a roll-up chain fully trustlessly on top of Ethereum. So this is a big step forward. It's a big step forward in compatibility, a big step forward in flexibility, and a big step forward in cost and performance. Okay, and finally, we offer in Arbitrum Beta 2 trustless finality as fast as Ethereum. Now, this is a roll-up product, which means that you post the data of your transactions on the Ethereum chain. But the instant that your data is on the Ethereum chain, the instant that it has finality on the Ethereum chain, then it has finality in Arbitrum. And that means that at that point, you know with certainty what the result of your transaction will be. You can take it to the bank. And that means that if you're doing a withdrawal, for example, of funds from the chain, that you can go to a liquidity provider, and the liquidity provider will have absolute certainty that your withdrawal will happen. And so they'll happily be willing to loan you funds against the withdrawal, giving you your money fast. Trustless finality makes a big difference to users and in applications, and it's there in Arbitrum Beta 2. Now, Adding 1 0 is, of course, cool. We added 1 0 in Arbitrum Beta 1. We're adding a second 0 of peak performance in Arbitrum Beta 2. Can we add yet another 0? We think we can. We think we can get to the goal of 1,000x cost advantage over Ethereum in 40,000 transactions per second with Arbitrum sidechains. Arbitrum sidechains is the next development of Arbitrum, which is coming behind the current rollup product. We think this is possible. It does require you to make a very minor additional trust assumption, and that is that your chain will be run by a committee of validators, and if even one member of that committee is honest, your sidechain will operate correctly. And what you get in exchange for that very minimal additional trust requirement or assumption is potentially an extra 10x in cost and transactions per second. Okay, so how did we do that? How did we get that second 0 to put on the end? Let me talk about how we did that. And I want to start by doing a cost comparison between, and these bars are roughly to scale, a cost comparison between doing a typical workload on Ethereum, like the Reddit workload, and doing it on Arbitrum Beta 1. You get an order of magnitude reduction in cost. And the reason you get that is because we move so much off-chain. But now I'm going to dismiss Ethereum from the chart, and I'm going to take this Arbitrum Beta 1 bar, and I'm going to blow it up to the full height of the screen so that we can zoom in and see where that cost is coming from. So with apologies for the cheesy graphics on the tools that we have available to us, I'm going to take that small bar, I'm going to blow it up to a big bar, and from now on, that's going to be my Arbitrum Beta 1 cost. Okay, now, let's break down the cost of doing a workload on Arbitrum Beta 1. Now, scale. The gray part is the cost of interacting with Ethereum, and the tiny blue part at the bottom, that's the cost of the actual Arbitrum steps. And in fact, I'll tell you that I had to increase the size of the, you could see it at all. It's about 1 part 300 of the total cost. So what you can see here is that Arbitrum Beta 1 offers some headroom for performance improvement. Now, obviously, if you want to get a big performance improvement over this, there's only one place it can come from, and that is where we went to get it. And that is to reduce how much you have to interact with Ethereum in order to get full trustlessness in Arbitrum. And so what we did in Arbitrum Beta 2 is we basically found a bunch of really clever engineering ways to vastly reduce the amount of layer 1 interaction you have to do without any sacrifice in security or trust, by moving a lot of things that you used to do expensively on Ethereum into that tiny blue bar on the bottom, which, by the way, I still, over on there on the right, need to increase the size of so that you can see it at all. Now, this is easy to say, move functionality from one place to another, but it's not very easy to do from an engineering standpoint, but we have done it. Okay, so the key, as I've said, is to think about what gets done where in this system. Doing something on legacy computers, it's untrusted but cheap. Doing something at layer 1, that's trustless, but it's very expensive. And doing something at layer 2 is trustless and cheap. So obviously, what you want is to do as much as you can at layer 2. And that's what we do. We've done a lot of re-architecting. We've done a lot of re-engineering. We've done a lot of careful security analysis to take a lot of things that operated previously at layer 1 and outside the system and move them onto layer 2, because that's where the sweet spot is. And in that vein, I want to introduce one of the heroes of Arbitrum Beta 2, and that is this new component that we call ArbOS. Essentially, what it does is it runs the chain, and it runs it at layer 2. That is, it manages the deployment of contracts, it tracks ownership of ETH and tokens, it protects contracts from each other to provide the security and isolation that's required of smart contracts. It does resource accounting, it unpacks batched and compressed transactions, it verifies signatures and all those other things, and does that cheaply and trustlessly at layer 2. This is the secret sauce. So many aspects of managing, controlling, and securing your chain, which were previously done either in a centralized way or expensively at layer 1, we can do at layer 2 because we swept them into ArbOS, and our new architecture allows that to happen. So let me talk about the future roadmap for the development of our technology. Full release of Beta 2 soon, very soon. Watch your social media. The first mainnet release of Arbitrum Beta 2, we're projecting for for quarter 4 of 2020. That is by the end of this year. We expect to be on mainnet by then. We expect to be on mainnet with integrations with Chainlink, with others, with application launch partners. And we're really excited for how this is shaping up. Projected for by the end of this year. Sidechain capable Arbitrum, the version that is able to get that yet additional 0 at the end of our cost and performance improvements. This is projected for quarter 1 of 2021. We have a lot that's exciting in our pipeline, and we're really eager to talk to folks about it. We're excited for the release of Arbitrum Beta 2, which I said is coming up very soon. And we believe that this is the path forward to take smart contract computation to the level that it needs to reach. I would be happy to answer any questions about this on Twitter. It's at Ed Felton, just like my name. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ed, for the introduction of ArboS. It sounds very exciting, and your roadmap looks absolutely fantastic. Excited to see where that goes.
We are super excited. We really are happy to be working with this community. We're happy to be we're happy with where things are going, and we really urge you to watch what we're doing. And if you're an application developer, we can help you. We can help solve your cost problem.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to move on to and me, a peek behind the random number generator curtain. So yeah, will blockchain gaming make random number generation become a part of your everyday life? This panel will discuss all the interesting hoopla around keeping the RNG mechanism secure. What is Chainlink VRF, and how is it going to enable the next generation of verifiable randomness on chain? Oliver, take it away.
Sure thing. Thanks, Dustin. So thank you all for joining today's session. As Dustin said, RNG and me, a peek behind the random number generator curtain. My name is Oliver, and I'm with Chainlink. I will be the moderator for this panel. And in today's session, we'll be covering randomness in gaming, the importance of provably fair randomness, Chainlink VRF, and interesting topics within randomness, which is often overlooked. So now I'd like to welcome our incredible panelists who have been helping build some of the key foundations for blockchain gaming. Justin Wu, co-founder of BED Protocol, Savas Lassapoulos, CEO of Blockpegnio, and Craig Russo, lead at Polyant Games. So Justin, why don't you get started? Tell us a little bit about yourself and BED Protocol, and then Savas and Craig can take it over after.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Justin Wu. I'm one of the co-founders of BED Protocol, and I handle operations. And BED Protocol is a fully customizable white label solution for launching and managing online gaming applications, such as esports betting applications or casinos. And essentially what we do is we give you all the tools and all the technology that you need in order to run and manage a fully compliant, crypto-ready online gaming application in esports or in casino. So that's all the games you need, all the back office you need. And we help basically everything. You can think of us almost as like a Shopify or WordPress for online gaming apps. And that's what we do.
Awesome. Craig, do you want to give an overview? Don't think I can hear you.
Can't hear you, Craig.
There we go. Is that better?
Perfect.
There we go. All right. I'm Craig Russo. I'm with Polyant Games. We're an investment group focused on the non-fungible token asset class. Obviously, one of the of which being blockchain gaming. So we have a direct investment group as well as a startup ecosystem, which a lot of the Chainlink integrations will exist within there. So happy to talk about that.
Awesome. Savas, give a little introduction on what you're doing at Blockpegnio.
Hello, Oliver. Thanks for having me here today. I'm Savas Lassopoulos. I'm from Greece. I'm the founder of Blockpegnio. It's a company which our main focus is to make real games on blockchain, but also help other companies migrate their games to blockchain as well. Currently, our main focus is our flagship title, The Six Dragons, which is in open alpha and runs on Ethereum mainnet using the engine platform.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for very insightful information from all of you, and I'm excited to continue to follow your development in the gaming ecosystem. So now let's get started with some questions about randomness. And the first one I'd like to ask everyone is, do you think provably fair randomness is the next big thing for gaming? And if so, why? Anyone want to go first with this?
Yeah, I would say provably fair gaming is definitely something that's extremely important, especially when you're talking about the difference between the legacy online gaming space and the emerging blockchain online gaming space with regards to like casino and esports, but mostly for casino. I mean, if you look at the demographics of the legacy online gaming space, you see a lot of the baby boom generation there. But now you see the millennial generation really taking over in terms of the size of that particular market segment. And our generation, part of this generation as well. But I mean, we really like to verify things ourselves and just not take somebody's word for it. Really get the information firsthand. So I think being able to like in real time verify something is provably fair, especially when you're betting money like on a coin flip game or in a virtual roulette. Value add, considering that a lot of the legacy online gaming space, people are gaming more or less in a black box. They don't really know the RNG behind it is provably fair, even if it's certified or not, which most of them are, of course. It's very, very different when you can actually verify it yourself in real time and see the cryptographic proof. So I mean, that's definitely a huge value out there.
Completely agree with you, Justin.
Yeah, I can add to that. So more on the traditional gaming side of things, with the emergence of blockchain gaming, essentially games which traditionally exist in silos are opening up to a larger ecosystem. And the fact that the assets themselves within games are beginning to be represented on chain, the whole gaming experience becomes far more important from an asset perspective in terms of the scarcity, the supply, the experiences enabled by the unique asset combinations. And so ultimately having that on-chain proof that gives the users the trust necessary in order to have this upfront investment, this sweat equity, and most oftentimes now actual capital deployment into games, so that their experience long term won't ultimately become for naught. So essentially, with the emergence of these internal game economies, it becomes ever more important for aspects of randomness to be probable and trustworthy, so that the experiences themselves don't collapse it, internally, because once users don't trust the assets and the randomness that occurs in games, that's where a lot of issues of is this being gamed? Am I wasting my money and time? So it's really the next step to facilitate these new generations of games that we hope to have real world assets and tradable assets inside of.
Yeah, covered pretty much everything. But as a gamer myself, I always remember having doubts about the randomness of the games I was playing myself, and it's in our nature as humans to question variance in casinos and games and everything. When it goes back, we can't forget when it was good. So having probable fair on-chain randomness evaporates that doubt from the player, and they can feel confident about their efforts that it's been translated into a fair outcome.
Absolutely.
Exactly, and essentially, that is what Chainlink VRF is. So I think for the next question, I'd like if you could explain how Chainlink plays a role in your underlying architecture, as well as the importance of oracles to your smart contracts.
Yeah, I think when you're
Yeah,
building something that's completely on-chain, in terms of like, like imagine a totally on-chain casino or a betting app, you need to have some sort of a verifiable source of randomness, and that's what Chainlink VRF does for us at Bet Protocol. As you know, like if you have a roulette or like a slots machine or something that's going on, of course you have the random number generator that is the source of the randomness that helps to basically resolve whatever game that is, whether that it's a win condition or a lose condition for the player. And that can definitely be a central point of failure in a lot of systems. And it could be an area of concern for the player where they have to essentially either play in a black box or make some sort of trust trade-offs that are less than optimal. And I think a lot of the advantages of blockchain and cryptography and blockchain-based systems are that a lot of these systems are trustless, quote unquote, in the sense that the end user doesn't really have to trust so much that the implementation is sound, because they can check and verify themselves. I don't know if I really like the term trustless so much. I prefer trustworthy way more, because like if I can actually go and verify in real time that the VRF is legit myself, I would say that that's pretty trustworthy. Like instead of it being trustless in the sense that in any other sense of the word. But in terms of on the casino side, that's how we're using it. For the esports side, on esports betting, which is going to be a big release for Bet Protocol for sure. We're using Chainlink oracles to provide the esports data, the live and the historical esports data and odds for resolving our esports betting markets. So essentially, what we have is data that's coming from the off-chain world, and it needs to inform markets and smart contracts that are on-chain in order to resolve these markets. And we're basically using Chainlink for that interface.
Awesome. Yeah, I go next. Yeah, so as I mentioned in the onset, we have a startup ecosystem. It's really a third-party driven ecosystem that's attached to our investment activities. And we actually introduced a very unique asset into this ecosystem, which will be on sale on September 15th, where it's called a PGFK. And now this is a membership and rewards NFT, ERC-721 NFT, that also actually has a coexisting state as an ERC-20 that users will be able to switch in between, but I won't get into that. But one of the key components of this PGFK is the concept of stacking, or the more that you hold, the better the rewards outcomes. And that can be anything from reduced trading fees on some of the decks that we're developing to things like random NFT airdrops. And so that's where we're really looking to leverage VRF technology specifically in order to build that layer of trustworthiness that enables users to see, for instance, we drop only 5 of our partners' NFTs to our ecosystem, so that can be probably fair and trustworthy, and people can check that, and so that they understand, like, hey, I didn't receive it, but it was for a reason. It was completely random. And so I think that component of this next generation of things, everything from in ecosystem airdrops, things like loot boxes, all these kind of fundamental things that drive internal game economies and larger, game ecosystems as we'll progress here, it's just going to be an integral component. And so we hope via our initial implementation of these types of concepts is that we can then help inform the startups that we invest in, the startups that are our ecosystem, as to kind of the best practices to facilitate your internal economies. Because again, nothing's existing really in a silo anymore. And so having kind of all these areas covered to build that trustworthiness as the core bedrock to your games and your dApps, your DeFi applications, it's just going to be very important. So yeah, it's starting September 15th.
Thanks, Greg. And
right now, NFTs, we have our flagship game, the Six Dragons, and NFTs are sold like for hundreds, even thousands of dollars. So value right now in NFTs is pretty important. So when you have some features that increase the value of these NFTs and include the randomness in them, it's pretty important to have that proof for the player that uses these features. So, and this is where Chainlink and Oracle's coming. We feed all this data. We need the percentages of these features, and we get the outcome, which is provable on chain. Then we grab that info and we feed the game with that outcome, and the player can always check this proof on chain. In general, like Greg said, like the word next gen a lot because it is used a lot in gaming. But after many years, I believe that now we can speak about next gen gaming with the introduction of oracles and blockchain in general.
Thanks, Alice. And Craig, given you come across so many different games in the industry, would you say that you agree with the statement that randomness can be the most powerful tool to use in a game, but also if it's used incorrectly, it can have horrible consequences?
Yeah, I mean, essentially it's about striking the right balance between what you can expect and what you won't expect, right, in a gaming experience. And so I think, that applies not only to the current traditional games, but when you're thinking more along the lines of the output of my gaming, this concepts of like play to earn, there needs to be a fundamental element of randomness so that people can't predict and eventually game these internal economies, because that's ultimately what's, as people become more and more comfortable with, the NFT market, with blockchain gaming, there's gonna be a lot of opportunities for gaming systems. So essentially, as a game developer, as a DeFi developer, a lot of people are treating DeFi as gamified, finance, calling it games almost. It's important to have elements of things that users will not expect, because ultimately that's going to feed into unique reward outcomes that will have better lifespans on the secondary markets. But also having that fine balance with making sure that users don't go into things completely blind every single time, because it's just the replay and retention value will get hurt that way. And so I think it's just finding the right balance, and it's no different than what we have in traditional games, but now it just has that extra complexity associated with these larger worlds and on-chain tracking and NFTs, and it's infinitely more complex, but at the end of the day, it's the same concepts.
So it's a bit like an art. You need to know the amount of randomness and exactly where to implement it.
It could be at the asset level. It could be at the quest or experience level. And so there's different things that each, as you're designing a game, it's like designing a puzzle, right? And so these types of things will ultimately make the experiences that collectors and actual investors will want to move into the more blockchain gaming space, which will only fuel these economies.
And Justin, quite curious, since with Bet Protocol, you must have come across this quite a bit. I'm wondering which incidences with poor implementation of randomness have you seen pop up the most in the industry, and how do you see provably untrained randomness, like VRF, becoming the new norm for blockchain gaming?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the implementation of how the games actually interact with the source of randomness. I think when you have something like an online variant of a real world game, it needs to play like that actual game. Like you can't have a coin flip that always lands on heads for whatever reason. It doesn't matter whatever the source is, or you can't have like a roulette wheel that has 3 different colors when it only shows 2 or something like that. It can't be something crazy like that. So there needs to be like an actual connect between the real world game itself and its online variant as well. That's something that's very important, no matter what the randomness source is behind that. So that's definitely very important. And in the legacy space as well, there are a lot of instances where slot machines have this thing called a near miss, where of course the player still loses, but the player then is tricked into thinking like, oh, they only missed by a little bit, so maybe if they bet again, like they're going to win next time, which of course is a fallacy, right? So this is like one of these reasons why the randomness is very important, of course, and the randomness needs to be provably fair, but then also the implementation and the use of that randomness needs to also be in a way that is fair and also, you know, consistent with real world, you know, games, and also with some sense of morality, in the sense that it shouldn't be telling you that you almost won when in fact, you know, you didn't, you know. So it's something that definitely needs to be addressed, especially in the online gaming space on top of the blockchain, because I think we as you know, blockchain pioneers, we kind of have this responsibility to say, you know, we're the ones that are pushing the technology forward, and you know, we're the ones that are building the vision for this new paradigm of online gaming. Because you know, the people that I talk to in traditional online gaming, and then also in the conferences and things back when they were having conferences, everyone was talking about blockchain and how it was going to disrupt massively, you know, online gaming. And we're already seeing it there. And since we're the ones here, I think it really, you know, we have the responsibility to implement it well, and to use great tools like, you know, Chainlink VRF and you know, Oracle's to get data and resolve markets.
Thanks, Justin. I think we've run out of time, so I appreciate you all for joining today's session. Panelists, it's Craig, Justin, Savas. It's been awesome talking to you, and look forward to, you know, future panels and collaborations.
Absolutely. Thanks, Oliver. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, super excited for VRF and what that can do for just gaming and other use cases. So really excited for that. Moving on, how autonomous organizations use DeFi to govern real-world assets. The dream of DAOs is the ability for a crowd to manage an entity. How can a DAO bridge on-chain events with off-chain assets? What is the importance of oracles in creating this off-chain and on-chain bridge? This panel is moderated by Scott Lewis of DeFi Pulse, which he's going to be a great resource of keeping track of all things DeFi. Scott, you're live. Go ahead and take it away. Oh, he's not here yet. He should hop on just a second. Let's just wait for him. How you guys doing?
Good.
All right, I'm going to hop off so Melanie can get back in.
Hey, sorry, y'all. I thought I was in here, but was not. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, cool. Well, with a foursome of builders in the space, and we're going to be talking about kind of bridging real-world assets on the blockchains. Sort of. It's pretty cool because it kind of greatly expands the total addressable market of the space. And I guess without further ado, we'll kind of get everyone to just introduce your protocol and kind of just let us know what problem you're trying to solve. Maybe first, if Ray from Curio Invest. If you want to kind of give us a breakdown, what you're doing right now.
Thank you, Scott, for the invitation. I'm very pleased to share more about Curio, what we're doing as tokenization, and introduce it today. Curio is a Swiss-based project launched about 2 years ago. We're working on a very exciting topic called asset tokenization of real-world hard assets with focus on collectibles. We're starting with rare collectible cars. These are not the typical assets and vehicles you see on the street, but rather those ultra rare collectibles, maybe some classic or even hyper limited edition cars that have some provenance. And what we're doing is wrapping it in a legal setup that enables us to tokenize it under the European digital law, and in that way protect the investors' rights and give them for the first chance access to this asset class. And around this topic, we're introducing this DAO concept in which we bridge that gap between the screening, the scouting, and the selection of these collectibles and the tokenization of real-world assets. So I'll be happy to share more information, more content about that throughout this chat. And yeah, very excited to hear about other projects here today.
Cool. That sounds interesting. And we also on the panel we have Melanie from WAM Protocol. If you could explain a little bit about what you're building and you know, what problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. Hello from Berlin. I'm Melanie, founder of Warm Protocol, and we're scaling an entire ecosystem to help creators, platforms, and brands to monetize word-of-mouth content. Word-of-mouth content is the content known as authentic product recommendations from real brand lovers. Why are we doing this? It's because we have seen, I think, over decades, a misalignment of interest in the marketing and advertising space, where you have a lot of platforms that need to get everything out of the advertiser and all the information, and of course have incentives to increase content, advertising content on their platforms to monetize content that no one really wants to see anymore. I think everyone knows to press the skip button on YouTube. No one really wants to see ads anymore. And that's where we believe we have created a solution for advertisers to market to new customers through authentic word-of-mouth recommendations. And these are recommendations everyone is already doing 2.1 billion times a day. People are doing it on all sorts of social networks. So we said, why not helping these people to monetize with it?
Cool. That's interesting. Yeah, and then we have Ryan Burgum from Teller.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me on here. Really excited to share some of our work and talk about Chainlink. Give some pump into that. So at Teller, we are an open source credit risk protocol. We create money markets where pretty much users can earn interest on deposits, or they can connect their credit history from the real world to borrow in DeFi without credit. So the real problem that we're solving is lowering the barrier of entry for new users to enter the DeFi space by utilizing what is your actual credit history, that from transactions in your bank account all the way to actual credit scores here in the States, and really replacing that as the collateral needed in DeFi.
Cool. Yeah. So how it can you explain maybe for the audience how that would be different than like a Compound or an Aave?
So we see Compound and Aave as focusing on the risk-free rate in DeFi. They're over-collateralized lending platforms and protocols that have enabled this actual movement of money. What we're looking at is the ability to connect your bank account or connect your credit info, where we have actual risk assessments that happen off-chain in almost like a layer 2 environment. And that risk assessment is brought into the loans that a borrower can receive, whether that's the interest that it affects, the minimum collateral needed, and really we have the ability to perceive this as a slider, where based on the data that the borrower provides, they can go all the way down to having no collateral and really increasing the capital efficiency in what they can take out.
All right, cool. Yeah, maybe we could move to Greg from DMM. Could you explain a little bit about what DMM it is and kind of what problem it's solving?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, DMM or DeFi Money Market basically is solving a pretty simple problem. Actually, it's just returning yield to kind of the global economy. And the way we do it is actually pretty simple. So you can get 6.25% off your currently Ether, USDC, USDT, DAI, and we are just actually OKX just proposed to the DAO, the DMM DAO, to list their stablecoin as well. And what you're able to do is just swap in and earn 6.25%. The interesting thing is our main goal is to provide very stable, uncorrelated yield. So as we all know, a lot of the DeFi interest rates kind of bounce around a lot. The DMM protocol is really about providing this stable, uncorrelated yield at 6.25% for crypto holders. And the way we do it basically is by taking real world assets and bringing them on chain. We use Chainlink oracles for all of this. And what we basically let you do, we let you see the actually underlying assets backing the entire ecosystem. And then these assets need to be physical real world assets. They need to have three basic criteria. One is we must have a first lien senior secured position on them, which basically means if something goes wrong, we have the right to recover those assets. And then secondarily, it must be over collateralized on an income production basis. So while we pay 6.25%, we generate anywhere from 8 to 11% off the assets. And third, the actual collateral has to be over collateralized. And so the protocol itself, DMM, provides 6.25%, and the DAO is governed by DMG tokens. and they have the right to govern the ecosystem. But also, as you probably heard, there's an extra portion of interest being accrued, and they can decide what happens with that. So in a couple of weeks, we'll probably be burning the first round of tokens. So it's really about providing this stable, uncorrelated yield using real world assets in combination with crypto.
Cool. Yeah, what all is the DAO considering food coins at all? Or is it farming within the purview of the DAO?
So the DAO actually decides pretty much everything, right? So we did the first case basically with autos, basically a pool of autos. We actually have that will be probably posted for consideration shortly. We've already told the community aviation. So I believe we were the first people with Chainlink to actually tokenize an auto pool. I think we'll be probably the first with Chainlink on the aviation asset as well. But anybody actually can introduce, and there's a basic structure that allows folks, you must have a certain amount of ownership of DMG to introduce assets, so you have something at risk. But yeah, the idea is that any real world asset that fits into this framework of those three main points I told you, people can introduce and generate yield for the consumers, as well as have lower financing costs, and it's available basically globally to anybody with an internet connection.
Cool. Sounds interesting. I guess maybe just following on that, Greg, like what was the biggest challenge to kind of put those assets on chain, the DMM ran into?
Yes, it's a great question because we're kind of bridging these two worlds and they're not necessarily the easiest to play together with. So our approach really was to put forth use cases. So we really spent a lot of time, and we got Tim Draper and the Draper guys were involved over more than a year ago when we started to build this out. And the idea was actually we would build it and then show it to the community and see what they thought. So actually, when you convert your crypto into and use the MM protocol, you convert them into M tokens, and we've seen just in since March actually a 27,000% growth, and all organically in the use of these. The biggest thing we had was when you're looking at the real world assets, you need to have a lot of different data points, and they need to be from trusted third parties, right? So that's something you need somebody else to do. And this is the reason we started working with Sergey and Johan, the whole team over there very early on, to develop this framework around it. Because our idea is, if you look at it, we have an explorer and you actually see all the underlying assets. You see the liens, you see all the information. So if you look at the traditional system, all that information is opaque. You never get to see it. So here you're able to generate higher yields. So the DMM, the defined money market account, is about 5 times better than the average, traditional money market account. But you also have the benefit of seeing actually how these things are being generated and how it's backed. So I think that we're at the very beginnings of what's a very large trend, I believe, in kind of melding these two worlds.
Cool. Yeah, I guess if we could just kind of hit on these same point, like Ray, Fucuria Invest. What did it take to kind of get the cars on chain, if you will? And what was the biggest hurdle you had to get over to do that?
Yeah, so Curio has been advocating the asset tokenization topic here in Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and over the last months, we became pretty much the first issuer who got the prospectus approved by the regulator that was directly collateralized and backed by the real asset. So in a way, by having the real asset wrapped with the security, we managed to issue a public sale that represents essentially this particular token, this particular asset. In this case, we subscribed a $1.1 million Ferrari F12 TDF, a collectible, 1 out of 799. And the idea is here essentially to have this kind of setup that enable us to replicate this legal wrap to different assets, and afterwards essentially enable investors to have a direct link to these assets by having a token that represents each asset. And when it comes together with the with evaluation and so on, then we use, of course, the Chainlink price feeder to gather different APIs of the particular asset, let's say in this case the Ferrari, and essentially bring kind of a real-time or an independent price. So you, for the first time, have on the one hand a token that represents the real asset, and in a way gets you can trade it on stock exchanges, and there are a few as we speak, but you also have this real-time independent price feed. And this enables us, as we frequently mentioned in the past, very novel new cases. We see the asset optimization of an asset itself, not the end point, but the starting point. And in our roadmap, we have very exciting projects that work around the DAO concept and stablecoin, rebalancing kind of the vaults with these assets and using this independent price feed as a tool to acquire or sell those underlying tokens.
Which car is going to appreciate the most over the next 10 years?
Yes.
Make and model.
When you look at collectible assets, you see that they share similar properties such as scarcity, some of them provenance, and so on. And when you look at classic cars, you know, particularly coming from those that maybe were exhibited at different galleries or events, maybe races that were owned by, you know, famous people, you see that there's a few that share kind of that pedigree. When you're looking at, you know, the Ferrari index shown by Haggerty, that includes top 20 cars and so on. And yeah, I guess one cannot say the future, but you can already get the feeling about what's going on there in this collectible sector.
But if you had to pick just one,
yeah, if I had,
what's the go-to? Ferrari?
I would then certainly go for Ferrari. What you see here today, the brand is capturing a significant market share, and you see that the assets have hit, you know, auctions and a few other trades, and you see in a way records starting with the GTO out there and many other ones.
All right, cool. Yeah, I guess moving on to Teller a little bit. When we say credit scores are on-chain, I can understand easily how that means that people that interact with the chain can, in making the credit decisions, can see the credit score. But part of like a credit score is sort of, or part of just issuing credit is what happens when they don't pay. Like, how does Teller approach that problem?
Yeah, so I think there's two ways here. The first being your credit score is not actually on-chain. So we've situated our protocol in 3 different ways. First, we have data providers that feed in the actual information. And it's very focused on the consumer. The consumer is the borrower in this case. So the borrower will request their credit or request their bank transactions from a data provider. That's hooked up into the protocol. So let's say they get their actual FICO score, or they get their bank transactions for the last 60 days. They then submit that to our second world, which is this kind of layer 2 cloud distributed node like ecosystem that actually runs a credit assessment algorithm. So it feeds in the data. So an example is your balance for the past 60 days. It takes the lowest balance and it does a loan to balance to debt ratio and says, based on the balance to debt, we can actually calculate the interest rate that this borrower should amass. So based on the algorithm itself, it spits out the loan terms, and that is the only thing that's written on chain. We've done this very strategically because users definitely do not want credit scores attributed on chain, and really almost all financial data should be protected, and it should be made private. So the only thing that's written on chain and mapped to an ETH address is the actual interest rate that's charged to the loan, the amount of the loan, and like the collateral types essentially, or the asset. The second kind of world in answering that question is, once an actual loan is outstanding, how do you prevent someone from just running away with the money? So at onset, we've taken a pretty conservative approach in allowing specific whitelisted DeFi applications for that loan to be used within. So at the start, the loan is held within pretty much just a smart contract wallet that the user can then go use on Aave, on Compound, on Uniswap, DYDX. And we have different parameters built within that based on how unsecured you are, what your use cases are of that loan specifically. Expanding past that, we've actually already had a partnership with a third-party debt collector here in San Francisco that if the borrower does default, there is real recourse as there would be in the traditional sense.
All right. Well, I think it's probably better than my idea of putting everyone's information on chain to not do that.
Would you use that?
Yeah, I don't think that. Dicey. That would be dicey, I think, from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah, also just like a mob developing and killing you perspective too.
Yeah.
But terrible. Okay, so I guess on to maybe the most anticipated part of the panel. Melanie, how does WOM use Chainlink?
Well, we are using the price feed of Chainlink, provided already in a couple of applications that have integrated the WOM protocol. These applications are kind of social networks or publishing platforms where content creators are creating exactly this kind of content, honest, authentic product recommendations. And of course, the platforms who are monetizing with this kind of content instead of advertising, and the creators who are creating the content want to know the right price, the trusted price for our token, for the WOM token. And so Chainlink is providing this trusted information to users of these platforms. We have already a couple of 100,000 users on these platforms. So we see already the WOM protocol is tested live. We still, of course, are improving it over the next years. And but it's great to see that especially young people who are using these applications are already seeing the price feed every day and are earning WOM based on the given price.
Cool. Yeah, Greg, how's DeFi Money Market integrated with?
Yeah,
Chainlink?
so we use Chainlink in a variety of ways, but it's basically because we're using these real world assets. It's an essential kind of glue to our ecosystem. So we obviously use the price, the information off, how USDC, ETH, everything is performing. But more importantly, because we have, and I'll take the example of actually aviation, which is almost, the Chainlink team's almost done with this, so we can introduce aviation as an asset class. We did cars previously. We need third-party data feeds of valuation, right? And valuation is updated. So for example, in the case of cars, we had Black Book. Black Book is kind of like this go-to, if you go to a dealership in the United States, they're evaluating everything Black Book. So with the cars, we actually set up these data feeds through Chainlink so that we could have real-time access to kind of the data and valuation. And then we'll also have feeds regarding how the actual liens and lien documents are and whether they're changed or not. And as the portfolio as a whole changes, it's also calculating debt ceilings and other items, right, to kind of keep the ecosystem balanced. DMM is a little different in the fact that we have a fixed amount of DMG, these governance coins, and there's not going to be any more, but the ecosystem itself is balanced that we couldn't have like $1 billion overnight because they would eventually need to work its way into a real world asset. So there's 3 states in the DeFi money market system. You could have traditional crypto, so USDC, DAI, whatever you'd like. Then you could have it go into fiat briefly, and then it has to come into a real world asset. So in the process of it into a real world assets, it's all tracked using Chainlink. And the additional component we're starting to work on is to track all the fiat flows with Chainlink, as well as how everything's performing. So this is kind of the next item we're working with right after aviation and real estate.
Sounds good. Ray, how's Curio integrated with Chainlink?
Yeah, so the way it's working is we're launching now that we finalized the token sale for the Ferrari, and we're planning to list this Ferrari token in different exchanges. The idea is to provide this kind of independent price link for customers to know whether they're trading at a premium or a discount. And once customers become more aware, we expect to have additional liquidity on the asset. And of course, more people would know when to trade. This is the first step. The second step is going forward, we're planning to build this algorithmic stable coin that rebalances their vaults based on the real assets. So basically, by having users access to these vaults, they can essentially capture, store their card token into the vault and get a loan based on that card token, and the algorithm would then be linked to the Chainlink in order to get that pricing and know how many tokens it will be required to collateralize that loan.
That makes sense. Then moving on to Ryan, a little bit more suspicious of a case.
Yeah.
Looking over the Towler Finance website, I see Framework Ventures listed as a backer. They're primarily known as Chainlink fanboys who also make investments. But I don't see Chainlink listed anywhere.
So we are keeping kind of our partnerships under wrap. Come to make a lot of announcements in the upcoming month. But from a high level, our world with Chainlink is surrounding that of credit. And I think there's a really interesting play here that makes it composable with something like Ray's working on Acurio and Greg at DMM. So this concept of credit is just trust in the traditional world. And that's how it relates back to assets like real estate or cars. And it really is this cornerstone of a centralized world, but it's become kind of concentrated into a couple entities. And in the States, we look at the big three who concentrate FICO, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. These companies today, they're fallible, they're insecure. We just had a huge data breach with Equifax, I believe last year or the year before. And because of that, we want to make a more open system and utilizing Chainlink to deliver this. For us, it's first bringing unsecured loans to DeFi. And that's just a result of bridging like CeFi, the traditional world, with DeFi, or we call it fintech really. But the credit bureaus of today is something that we can see evolving into something bigger in the DeFi space as a larger type of distributed credit bureau in our blockchain world. So long term, we can enable this creation of a new system of trust. That's less scalable, less subject to manipulation. And I can't reveal too much, but this is the tip of the spear for the work we're already doing with Chainlink.
All right. So I guess when we're talking about kind of composability in DeFi, especially kind of if we're thinking about maybe a long tail of oracles, is anyone willing to discuss whether it makes sense for Chainlink to be its own blockchain?
Very interesting. Well, it is Bitcoin, ETH, and Link right now, really heating up CoinMarketCap. So I think we're seeing this new world of Chainlink leading this idea that security is the next most important thing that's needed. And I think because of the security world, it doesn't necessarily have to. In its own sense, each Oracle provider to date is expandable and composable because Chainlink is situated at the onset on Ethereum, but each Oracle can provide an actual API feed to one smart contract, or you could have many Oracles providing it to a smart contract as an aggregator. I think the composability of Chainlink would be limited if we introduce an actual distributed blockchain set. And if we could potentially increase the security vulnerabilities that are solved by having each node being individualized. Something that I think brings it back, as you kind of talk about the long tail of oracles, is what DMM is working on in terms of this constant feedback loop that they're receiving from the loans themselves and the real world assets. This is something where I think is really interesting in composability that kind of plugs into this world of ongoing credit that we're working on. I think something that comes into the Chainlink ecosystem, and you have this almost like ongoing evaluation of credit from real world assets that I'm not sure if Chainlink being its own blockchain really helps to solve this long tail, the issue with that and the specifics of some of these like really interesting nuances of loans and new types of data feeds that can be plugged in as it is today as its own security network.
I guess we'll see what happens.
But open.
Melanie, do you want to comment on that at all? No.
Well, I'm also with Ryan here, and I think there are we have seen great partnerships, Chainlink, Polkadot, etc. I mean, there are so many great solutions out there, but of course, never say never. I think you are in a very, very good space, delivering already so many trusted Oracle technology sets, and there are so many more that are needed in the future. That's also why we are so keen. Of course, the price feed was something easy to get started, but we are so keen to work with you guys or with Chainlink on performance data, oracles, how to bring trust into the media, the publishing space, what content is actually really viewed, for how long, and all these. There are so many oracles needed to help us all these projects to really get slowly to decentralization, and to bring to bridge this gap between off-chain and on-chain. And I would say, keep focus.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, sort of like how will like the topology of like a mini chains world, how will it develop, and like what will be the most efficient ways for projects to self-organize. I guess a question for Greg. So if we're talking about real world assets and users holding tokens, what sort of claims on the underlying assets or claims on the cash flows or guarantees does a DMM, someone earning the 6.25% interest, what type of claims do they have that like on the underlying assets and those cash flows?
Yeah, you hit up on a great point, right? So if you're, 6.25% is a great return in today's environment, and the Fed, as most people probably saw, just announced that sounds like they're never raising interest rates again. So we think this is going to be here for a while. So I think if you look at when I described what's the essential components to introduce an asset into the ecosystem. So one, first lien senior secured position. Again, so the asset will be taken away if it's not paid. And because it is over collateralized, actually in the DMM ecosystem, if they don't pay, you would likely make more money, believe it or not, because they're highly over collateralized. The interest payments are over collateralized. So there's contractual relationships that DMM ecosystem holders have on kind of a global basis against these assets, and they have the rights to all these asset flows. And that's why if you look at it from a perspective from kind of predictability of kind of very stable uncorrelated yield, hard to do without having those three elements as a requirement, I think, in the ecosystem. And that's one of the reasons we set them very early on. And I think those requirements will maybe vary by country, et cetera, as we go forward. But I think they're really good building blocks because you can't go too far astray, which is one of the key elements to this, right?
Cool. Yeah, that sounds smart. Yeah, I think we're getting like kind of at the end of the time here now, and I just wanted to say a quick thank you to both SmartCon and Chainlink for supporting our work at DeFi Pulse and F Gas Station. And if you go to either of those websites right now, I think you'll see a big old Chainlink related banner on them. And yeah, we definitely appreciate their contributions to the community and us. And thank you to all the guests for explaining what y'all doing.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you all. See you all later.
Guys, follow Teller or use Teller.